Hi, friends. This is an episode of Help Me Be Me. This is Sarah Mae Bates, and today I'm talking about how to leave a relationship when you are stuck. And I don't mean like by violence, that kind of thing. I'm talking about your own ambivalence and rumination, like you're very, very unhappy, and yet you cannot figure out a way to get yourself to leave the relationship. And the first question I want to ask you, if this sounds like you, is do you think it's possible for someone else to get out of this situation? And then I want to ask you, do you think it's possible for you to get out of this situation? And if your first reaction, your body is telling you no, it's not possible, I want you to become curious about why. And I'm guessing it's because you've watched yourself not change for a very long time. You've watched yourself try everything. You've watched yourself be fully motivated and decide you're going to do it and then still not do it. And therefore, you've just lost hope. And I would just say to that, you are not alone. You are so common. It's so much more common than you think it is. And it is inaction that is a result of not having the right resources and not working on the right issues yet. It doesn't mean it's impossible. When we watch ourselves in inaction, we just assume it's true for us. We just assume it's our decision to be that way. And it's not. It's what I would call like an invisible wall that's made up of old rules, old fears, old traumas, things from our upbringing that we're unaware of, that we haven't really sorted through yet. And the first step is just awareness, becoming aware that that's happening. Then we can process these beliefs, untangle them, and we can move through them by just beginning to know where we, current us, our hearts truly lie, and where these old beliefs lie, because they're different. Yes, we have a lot of old beliefs that are important to us and that are true for us, but we also have a lot that weigh heavily on us that we just not have not accepted are not true for us and processed what that means. Like we're resistant to even knowing what that means, that these things aren't true for us. It's like we're just stuck in that feeling of, but it's impossible, but there's no solution, but it's impossible. That's not the end of the story because there is a path forward. We just have to stop staring at the wall and instead move around it, climb over it. So if you are in that stage of spinning and rethinking and just telling yourself again and again what is negative about changing and negotiating why you can't change, but you're also fully aware of how unhappy you are in your current relationship or your current situation, this is an episode for you. What I recognize in you is what I recognize in so many of my clients. It's an intense paralysis that is in many ways an effective coping mechanism that keeps us in a stage of inaction. And it's almost like a small part of us or a large part of us that's very, very invisible to us believes we deserve the suffering and believes it's okay for us to suffer because that's what we deserve. That's this, I don't know where it came from. It could be from maybe you were invisible as a child. Maybe your parent had addiction issues. Maybe your parent had depression issues. Maybe your parent was just incapable. Whatever it was, you internalized, it's okay for me to suffer. That's something I do. That's something I deserve, which is A, not true, B, probably completely buried in your consciousness. Like you might not be aware of that belief system. C, curable, changeable. And when you do, your life becomes a life you like and you love. So with that, there are three parts to this episode: the what, the why, and the how, the tools. Part one, the what. A feeling of unhappiness related to a relationship or a situation in your life, but the inability to do anything about it. So maybe you wanted to change it for years and yet you don't seem to change it or you don't seem to do anything about it. Other factors might involve the expectations of your parents, the expectations of your partner, your culture, the logic, whatever it is that you say to yourself of, but this is good. I'm lucky to have this. And that could come from so many different places. It could come from friends. It could come from, I don't know, rom-coms you grew up watching, like all the different sources that tell us, you know what, though, it's actually not that bad. I should be lucky. I should feel lucky. I should feel good about this. But deep down, you are supremely unhappy. Which brings me to part two, the why. I know that when we are stuck in ambivalence, it is a sign that there are old beliefs, old rules, old things acting up, and they are some part of our present day self is resistant to processing something. We're resistant to accepting some truth. It's like we're saying, no, but I can't, but that can't be true, but I can't do that. And so we just get stuck in this little loop, the circle of trying to control it. And usually that's an unmet need from childhood, something that feels so intense and scary and dangerous, and like it'll bring so much loss and so much dread and so much pain. Some part of it's like a childhood thing because the feeling associated with it is, I can't be powerless. I can't be powerless. I can't fall backwards. I can't. And so we fight it. We fight it again and again and again in our brain. And that prevents us from welcoming the truth of what needs to happen. And by that, I mean, your adult self has a decision that they want to make. Your adult self has truth that wants to come and be unearthed. There's something that is inconvenient that is true. And oftentimes we can't negotiate this old unmet need child self with the adult true self. And so we just go in a loop of trying to control what is. And I would say most often the impossible truth that we're trying to fight against is dread, at least in this situation, a dread of being alone, an intense awareness of our own inability to be by ourselves and what comes up when we are by ourselves. And I think that is super common as well. And that is, I think it's common to like the entire world, not just people that are stuck in bad relationships. There is so much that needs to be processed in, like, I would say like your 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, 40s if you don't do it then, 50s if you don't do it then. It just stays there. There's a lot of old pain that needs to be sorted out. I personally think it's best done in talk therapy. Some people don't like talk therapy. For you, I say talk to a friend who is a good listener. You need a bounce board to just let stuff come out. Journaling is super helpful, but I think talking is more therapeutic because you can hear your things that are stuck in the back of your brain come out and you're like, oh, it is true. I thought that I was not really meaning that, but I just heard myself say it. It is true. All of the things that exist inside of us need to be kind of put in order. And a lot of that stuff is really sad old feelings, feelings of that we didn't matter, that we weren't loved, that we needed somebody to be there and they weren't. A lot of pain. We all have a lot of pain that just needs to be heard. So when we don't do that, all of those beliefs, they kind of create a stew of terror, dread, loneliness, emptiness, hollowness, a need for somebody else to fix us. We cannot be alone. It's so devastating to be alone, to not have a project, a game of dolls to play with, like, I'm focusing on this person's problem and they said this to the other person and they had this problem. It's like, that's such a way to soothe that pain, is to be obsessed with somebody else's life and what's wrong with their life and what's wrong with the relationship. It's a pastime, it's an addiction, it's a project. So when we have things that confuse us about our current day selves, things that we're not doing, and we are like, why am I not doing this thing? Why am I not leaving this relationship I don't like? It is because of some weird old belief, like the fear of being alone, or oftentimes scarcity mindset. I think that's super common from people who had childhoods where they didn't get enough love, safety, attention, just feeling like they were going to survive because their parent had shown up and was present with them. So scarcity mindset, I have it still. I'm shedding it exponentially faster than I used to, but it sticks around. The scarcity mindset is a person who feels they are not enough, and therefore they have to take what they can get. So this will translate to feeling like there's not enough time, there's not enough people, there's not enough love, there's not enough people in the dating pool, there's not enough, I don't have any chances, because of, it's this feeling, energetic ingrained feeling of it's all going to run out. I need to take what I can get. And so scarcity can become that invisible wall that we just stare at and say, I can't go over that. I should just accept I'm stuck here. And there are various shades of this mindset. So I think we all have a little bit of it. A lot of us have a little bit of it. Another one, a deep, unseen feeling of dread, like a fear of loss. And that is often just unprocessed pain, unprocessed mourning. And that will also take on this invisible wall of fear. Like your body will kind of tell you by its immobility, I cannot survive alone. I cannot face that pain. And therefore, it is much more attractive and safer to stay in an unhappy relationship. So now, those are just my two examples. Moving forward from that, know that if you have not taken action in this situation, it's likely because of one of those invisible walls, some old unprocessed belief or old feelings that are inside of us that we feel are insurmountable and are afraid to sit in. We're afraid for them to flood our body because it's so intense and we don't know where to go from there. We don't have any tools to cope with it other than the drug of another person and their problems and our problems with them. That's the drug of preoccupation. So with that, let's get to part 3, the how, the tools. But first, a brief word from our sponsors. Okay. The first tool, how do we move forward from here? Well, we want to start to sort between old and new feelings. And then the goal is to start to honor the truth of how we feel now, like what I would call like your highest self, your most reflective, safe self, while soothing and teaching ourselves to tolerate the old fear-based unmet needs scripts. And what happens when we can start to divide these two things and start to act on what is the highest intention for ourselves? We start to feel our core strength as an individual get stronger and stronger and stronger. And we also, in the act of honoring ourselves and caring for ourselves, we start to feel more and more valuable, more important, more confident. Our sense of self-love grows. So you'll start to feel stronger, more stable, more empowered. And from there, any action becomes accessible. Because we start to feel safe with ourselves. We start to feel good alone. Outside of that, I think it's super helpful, important. I would almost say necessary to have some form of support if you are making this kind of change, like therapy. It's a lot of internal work. A lot of old stuff can come up. I think having support is just, it makes it all, it gives you a kind of a path to walk. I would also say outside of therapy, just building a nest of support for yourself right now, like an incubator while you do this work, is really important for change. So that means friends, hobbies, building up the resources you have in your life, doubling down on all newness, anything that can be additive to the definition of self that is you. All right, the first tool is called old record sorting. So I'm thinking of a record player here. We all have an old set of records, and you can recognize them by how they are warped and irrational, and they pop up at various times in your life. And so I wanted to start to process with you the sorting between what the old records, the old little tapes of emotion and feeling and fear are versus the new. So just by that, I mean, what are your scripts? What are the old dysfunctional broken records that come up? The ones that are scarcity based, the ones that self-blame. You can notice them by how masturbatory they are because they kind of tell you all the reasons that you're not going to change. It's just you talking to you about you. They're very self-centered. So I just want you to examine like what's coming up for you right now. What are the scripts of pain? And ask, that's the first prompt, what are my scripts of pain? Second, when and who are those from? What time? Who instilled that in you? What experiences created them? And for whatever it's worth, to a certain extent, we all have differing cultures of origin than our current culture, meaning what we believe, what we hold to be sacred in our present day lives. So like family of origin is its own culture, and it instills like all of these beliefs, expectations, right and wrong, that will be different than yours. You have to reintegrate and re-understand all that is true throughout your life and redefine all of the rules for yourself throughout your life. They will change each decade of your life. As you get older, they change. So never imagine that they should be fixed, because they should not be. Otherwise, you're, I would say, resisting the natural current of change that is organic in all of our lives. All right, next tool, stop, step back, soothe. So this is just shorthand tool for rumination. Do not indulge the rumination. As soon as you're in that, if you notice the energy of spinning, if you're like, oh, I've been here before, my thoughts have done an entire circle, it's a ruse. It's a red flag. Oh, I'm doing it again. I'm masturbating again. I'm not solving anything. As soon as that happens, it's a broken record. The goal is to stop, disengage from the thoughts, and step back and just soothe the energy in your body. And by that, I mean, what we're doing is we're giving control to our physical body. Meditation, if you can't do meditation, yoga is a really good one. Anything that has a complex yoga move that requires your brain shuts off. I like to do inversions with like really loud breathing because it kind of quiets your brain a little bit because you can't even hear your thoughts. Things that involve multiple steps are really important. Rock climbing, I've heard, is great for people. A recipe that requires a lot of focus. In that process, what you're doing is you are teaching your body, you're teaching your higher self, your highest self, how to empower yourself, how to take control in the face of dysfunctional thinking. And the more you practice that in response to the rumination, the more it works. Even if at the beginning, if you're like, it's not doing anything, it's not making a dent, eventually there's a tiny tipping point where you get better at it. It gets a little bit more effective. And then after that, your brain realizes, oh shit, this works. And it'll, after that point, it's downhill from there. You will never be afraid of being able to soothe yourself again. It just takes understanding that you do have power in the face of thoughts that overwhelm and bring toxicity into your body. And so what we're doing right now is working with the difference between you, your highest self, what you value, what you hold to be sacred, and you, meaning the thoughts that we often believe to be us. Like that is the kind of the glitching, the resistance, the fear scripts, the self that's trying to keep you unchanged. And that's the self that is, it's just like a reptilian self that's really possessed by, I can't, paralysis and like fear of change. Those are driven by old expectations of others, guilt, fear, shame. These are all kind of like lower base level, primitive energies. And in other words, your true self is the one that is deciding things from a calm, rational place, and not the self that is trapped in a fear of loss. And that true self, what I'll call the true self, is what you believe. It is the highest position of values because it's decided by a self who is not threatened. They are safe, they are balanced, they are reflective. And a lot of that self is really decided from a place of safety. It's like we have to give ourselves the opportunity to even know that that is a different being, like that's a different perspective. That's the one we want to obey, not the fear, not the rumination. And so the more we can calm ourselves and just redirect to like, what does my highest self want? The more your life reflects that, your decisions start to honor and reflect that. That is when your life takes a shape that is beneficial to you and makes you happy. All right, the next tool is a journal reflection, me versus culture. So I wanted to invite you to do this in the area of dissecting what is you and what is your culture and where that line exists. And by culture, I mean just whatever belief system we were raised within and grew up inside of, and whatever we interpreted as we have grown older. And by that I mean the expectations of the people around us, the society around us, and what they think is true versus what we feel is true, despite what that means, despite guilt, despite disappointing other people, despite not following that track that is expected of us by whoever. And so the prompts are, what are the rules, written or not, of my family of origin or of my culture of origin? And for this prompt, I want you to record themes that were passed down to you that you have held to be unbreakable, or things that you are going to be in trouble, you're going to be bad if you don't follow. Second prompt, what do I find friction around? And what does my soul fight against? In that definition, the previous one. And this is where we want to find where things are not lining up for us. Like some part of our being is telling you that you like are not right for you, are not true for you. Like your adult self today doesn't feel right with these things. And that is, welcome it. Don't criticize it, don't change it, just like welcome all that feedback. Where is not sitting right with me about all of these things I've been told are true? And then the next prompt, where are the areas I need to weigh pros and cons? Because what will come up is there are conflicts between, let's say, what my parents want and what I want now. Where I'm finding friction is, I don't agree with this thing. What we need to do in all of those individual instances is weigh what is more true for me, what feels more important to me. Like we have a little scale, like the scales of justice, and just there will be a right answer based on all the individual qualifications. And don't judge it. I'm not saying anything is right or wrong. Sometimes one thing will cause you more pain to make the joy worth it. And that's fine. I just want you to be able to give yourself the opportunity to weigh what each of those really means for you. And know that they will change over the course of your life. They will shift in their value and they will shift in their weight throughout your life. So continue to reflect on this. And for example, you might find that you have two things that are pretty equal and you feel more strongly in one thing. And the thing you are bumping on is this toxic, overwhelming result of guilt. And in reality, the thing itself is very clear. Like, for example, my parents have always told me it's so important to have X. To me, that is not important at all. So I can see the scales. I can see that my beliefs are over here. The thing that it is true for me is over here. So what's the factor I have to work on? Oh, it's the guilt. It's the manifestation in my physical body that is created by this thing. I don't hold this thing to be important, but this thing is occurring for me. Then I can actually tackle just that factor. Guilt is not necessarily true. Guilt can be very, very helpful in preventing us from doing things that injure other people or injure us. It, in its self-protective facets, is a good thing because it helps us avoid binge drinking, for example, or driving under the influence. I think those are really helpful versions of guilt. But when it comes to guilt that is generational, oftentimes we don't realize that that is something to be processed and overcome. Generational guilt is something that is occurring as a result of the changes, the rifts in our experience versus a past generation's experience, and our inability to translate and negotiate the fact that they have a different life than we have. It's not our job to solve for that ginormous rift that exists because it's real. Our job is to honor what we have been given, the cards we have been dealt, and what we can further for the next generation. At least that's my interpretation of it. If you have a completely different one, I completely respect that. It's totally up for your discretion. You get to decide what is important to you, but it cannot be decided based on a position of fear and lack. It must be decided from a place of honor, respect, reverence, growth, health. What is true? What is true? What is not true? Honor that, accept it, and move forward from there. So anyway, getting back to this tool, we give each of these items a little weighing on the scale. On one side, we have, this is the pain of losing my parents' love. On this other side, we have this feeling of joy of living in alignment. What is true for me right now? The pain of guilt is true for me right now. Okay, what is my ultimate goal? To live in alignment. So what am I going to do right now? I'm going to work on processing the feelings of guilt. I will say that when we move forward and become healthy, happy people, we honor everybody, and the world becomes healthier. Our family becomes healthier. To create health in ourselves creates health in others. It's almost like fixing a fungus in a plant. It just grows taller and stronger. So know that it is never selfish to grow healthier. It will only benefit all of those in your life that you love. So either way, our goal is just to weigh what is more important to us today and then not judge the answer, and know that it will change and there is a clear winner when you weigh each thing individually. So questions you might ask yourself: is this thing true for me? Does this benefit outweigh the negative? Is it true for me that this cultural belief is unbreakable and it's causing me a conflict of identity? Is it making me sick? Or is it true that this is okay? Is it true for me that I support this cultural belief? Or is it true for me that this is making me decline in my arc as a human being? Just want to throw those things out. Not nudging you in any direction, I promise. All right, the next tool, this is just a mantra, just to remember. Rumination is a decision to stay the same. In itself, it is an action. It is a commitment to staying the same, and it is selfish. The goal is just to notice that spinning energy is selfish and really focus on, do not indulge. Stop, step back, ground, do something that is positive, that is in honor of a positive result. Even if you feel like you're not making a dent, it is making a tiny, tiny, tiny dent. Never doubt that. All right, next tool is a journal prompt. When you're in that inaction loop of rumination, I want you to journal. This is a possible tool. Ask why. When we're taking refuge in the state of rumination, we're picking up our little game of dolls and we're saying, like, you said this and she said this and this, and we're not solving anything. I like to become curious when that's happening, and ask yourself in your journal, What am I resisting right now? What am I resisting knowing? What am I afraid of knowing right now? And I just want you to like free associate to that question. Usually it's something that we think is impossible that's going to create a lot of pain in our lives. Usually it's a feeling, with a kid's feeling of powerlessness. Like, I don't want to make everyone unhappy. I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want to have this pain happen. And then the second prompt, how can I give myself compassion around this feeling? How can I give myself love in this feeling and just hug myself and embrace this truth? And that'll be just like a little sweet moment of knowing, being like, hey, it's okay. It's okay to feel that thing. You're feeling it now and you're okay. Cool. The next tool, behold the wake-up calls. This is for anybody at any time in life ever, but the universe will give you wake-up calls, and they will arrive in the most ordinary coincidences. A friend giving you a note that says, this thing could really help you. A random article popping up, a random podcast popping up. Take notice and just say, like, it does have meaning. This is not just a coincidence. When we don't have a solution in front of us, or we don't have the tools to deal with something, it's because it's not present in our lives yet. When you notice something cross your path that has a little bit of like texture and resonance to it, it's not a coincidence. Take up those tools and really appreciate the meaning and power behind them. All right, the next tool is called Unconscious Watcher. This is a check-in I want you to do with the baby you who lives inside. That's what I call like kind of the watcher. It's a silent watcher. It's like your childhood self is always inside of you, like this little other being that's just kind of like floating and riding around in your body and witnessing all of the things you do. And sometimes the things you do hurt that person and make them feel terrible. And sometimes you do things that honor them, and then they feel strong and important, and they feel powerful and happy, and like they don't want to tolerate bad behavior from other people. So, question I have for you is, what do you need from you right now? Like, what does this little being need from you lately? What would be healing and what would be supportive to you this week? Just tune into that question energetically. The answer from my little me, was I need yoga and I need mental space. And the goal right now is to stave off the desire to focus on and replay what's wrong, how you're incapable, and instead focus on things that are additive, things that are healing, positive action. What would be empowering to me? What would be soothing, and what would give me a feeling of efficacy? What furthers my ability to take control of my being by stepping back from rumination and aligning my actions behind my highest, wisest self? And when we feel aligned behind that highest self, it's because we are treating ourselves well, we are respecting ourselves, we're feeling strong, soothed, empowered, and know that for that to take effect happens gradually. It happens in baby steps. It's not like a sudden, and now I'm powerful and I can do whatever I want. It's just like a slow turnaround toward the truth. It's a slow understanding of our own ability to be effective. And so know that the thing we are slowly letting go of is a feeling that we are incapable of dealing with hard things and pain. That feeling of, but it's impossible. I can't see the solution and therefore it doesn't exist. To rest in that panic is a ruse. Our goal is just to teach ourselves to soothe it, step back, do some yoga, do some grounding, some hiking, and move on. All right, and the last tool is called, but they're going to feel X, or I feel bad for them. A large part of this cloud of conditions in your life is codependency and an upbringing that has created codependency. And so what our rumination will often fixate on is feeling guilty for somebody else's feelings. And we start to go into that person's brain and we start to feel their feelings for them. That is not your jurisdiction. That is not accurate, true, real. It's your hallucination. So as soon as you start to go into somebody else's feelings, stop, step back, get back in your body. The first thing you need to do is ask, what do I feel? And how can I help myself feel grounded and centered in my body? How can I redirect myself to things I need to work on in my own life? Stop, step back, not your brain, not your property, also not real. So those are my tools. I hope that this is a helpful episode. Anyone who has the means, donations really help out the show. If you don't have the means, I totally get it. And if you could share it with somebody else that it could help, that helps me as well. And you can head to yaywithme.com for my tools and to click donate, or you can visit me on Patreon. So in closing, the addictive perspective is to indulge in all that you have done wrong, in all of the things you should have done, all of the things that are too late, not enough. All of this is a means to stay the same. So I just wanted to throw out to you a different frame. Maybe this is what you're supposed to have done. Maybe this is exactly the way evolution happens based on your particular life experience. Maybe this is what successful survival looks like. So just change your perspective on yourself. The goal of I'm going to call it addictive rumination, is to continue to dwell selfishly in the practice of martyrdom and inaction, and create excuses to talk to ourselves about how much we loathe ourselves as a means to stave off change and success and happiness. Selfish happiness. And that is like an addiction. The feeling of pain and the feeling of discomfort is an addiction, and the vanity of me, self-focus. So in that room, the one with just you and yourself and your thoughts about yourself, in that room, no one else exists. And we don't need to care about what is or isn't changing and what is or isn't alive and happening and new outside of this room. It's like we're on a drug and the world is living on without us. And it's like living as a dead person. So my point is, there's nothing worse than this. There's nothing worse than this. This is purgatory. We don't ever want to live here. This is the worst it could be, is just being in purgatory. Pain, being active in pain and overcoming pain fucking sucks, but it's not as bad as this. So never forget that. You definitely don't want this forever. And you are definitely not static. You are never ever static. So even if you don't feel like you're changing, all we want to do is just continue to welcome new information, new insights, new tools, new people, new perspectives, new. Keep clawing at it with all that you have, and keep your eyes focused on the place you want to go. That point behind the mountain up ahead of you, you can't even see it from here, but you know what it looks like, you know what it feels like, and you know what you'll have when you get there. Just focus on that point. Send you my love. I have been where you are now, and I know you will get where you need to go. Do not give up hope. And don't forget to smile.